Welcome back. It is Vintage Super League Finals Day. I'm now joined by Luis Scott Vargas. How you doing, Luis?
I'm doing pretty well. So first of all, you have to call that deck Frobots.
Frobots, is that better?
Yeah, Frobots has to be the name. Though, in the interest of full credit, I guess it was Javier David played it at the LCV finals last at the end of last year, and that was the deck I was going to play if I had beaten Ifro. And then after he beat me, I was like, I think this deck's sweet.
Okay.
I mean, it's basically like got the same mana disruption as like a normal workshop deck, but instead of the Forge Master, Metamorph, anything like that, you play Triskelion, Arcbound Ravager, Sword of Fire and Ice, which I thought was great against one of the decks I thought Chris would bring, which was Merfolk.
Is there Triskelion in there too?
Oh yeah, you got
Oh
to
God, there's three Triskelions. I missed that the first time through.
yeah, you have to combo with the Arcbound Ravager.
Of
So
course you do. Frobots. Awesome. All right, well, let's see what these guys have queued up for match number two. Looks like a Gush deck for Eric. And, oh, it's Chris's turn to be on the workshop side of things. Two Sphere of Resistance. No lands in his draw. He's got a Pearl. Oh, he's got a Mana Crypt. He'll be fine, right?
yeah, Chris can generate 6 mana on turn one, which can't actually play three 2 drops because one of the sphere makes subsequent spells cost more, but Ifro's on the play and has double spell pierce.
Oh,
So
boy.
looks like Ifro's on like a Delver deck of some kind. You see a Volcanic Gush, Spell Pierce, and Probe. That usually indicates that. So, and Chris
Just
Mulligan
mulligan.
that hand.
Really?
Whoa, I would. I don't think I would ever mulligan that hand. It
No.
doesn't have a permanent mana source besides, but it has Mana
It had the
Crypt and a
Crypt.
Mox.
It
Yeah,
had
I
Crypt
mean,
and a Pearl. It had three permanent mana.
I guess one concern is that the the workshop deck can't kill that fast, and if you have mana crypt, is a bit of a liability. But that hand seems like it's better than a 6 card hand. It's maybe not an insane hand, but it's got a lot of disruption.
This is Chris's weekend of interesting mulligan decisions.
Well, I think the mulligan decision at the PTQ, which I assume you're referring to, of 6 lands ultimate price, with his Esper deck, is something that you can debate. I don't think it's like a slam dunk keep or
Oh
anything.
yeah, I'm not saying he's wrong.
Yeah.
I'm just saying they're interesting.
So Ephro's got a pretty good chance of being able to spell pierce whatever Chris leads with, depending on what it is. I mean, a Chalice for Zero, of course, but Chris isn't going to lead with Chalice for Zero. Workshop does not pay for spell pierce mana very much. So even if Chris can add 4 mana and play a 2 drop, it's unless it's a Revoker, it is going to get spell pierced. And Ephro's pretty priced into spell piercing anything that comes out here, and then following it up with Strip Mine and another spell pierce, which is a pretty disruptive opening.
How do you play this hand if you're Chris?
I would be tempted. Like the highest reward is to land a Trinisphere, but the problem is against one counterspell that's not great.
Right.
So I like his line of you lead with Chalice for one, and then whether or not it resolves, you can play a Thorn of Amethyst. You can't lead with a Thorn first because that makes it so your Chalice costs 2, and you don't want to play Revoker on turn one because you don't know what to name. I mean, you could name like Dak, Fading in the Dark, but that's not very great against an opponent with 1 mana and no moxes.
I'll buy that.
So Ifro can spell pierce this, and I suspect he will
You
off.
got to, right? You're playing
Yeah,
Delver and your opponent's going for Chalice 1. That is
it also blanks the spell pierces.
exactly.
So yeah, and off basic island against a workshop deck, especially with a volcanic and a fetch land in your hand. There's no reason not to.
Right. Chris does get to land Thorn.
Chris could just not cast another spell this game. Ifro's going to strip mine, and Chris may end up in a spot where you just can't ever play another spell. Mock's actually a fairly relevant draw for Ifra. You can cast it under the Thorn here, and then that means that you can play your spells, in a reasonable pace.
Yeah, it's going to cost him 1, but he's got that. So now he's building up. Wow, that was a great turn for Eric.
Well, Chris did draw the land, which is actually really good because it's Thorn, not Sphere Resistance, so you can play Revoker, name Mox Ruby, and now we've got a close game. If Chris missed there and then Ifro had a turn to do whatever he wanted and had Spell Pierce up, that would be different. But now Ifro's on 1 mana plus his land. These gushes aren't. You don't really want to just like fire out gushes into a Thorn and then return both your lands. I would imagine Ifro wants to wait, though gushing in response to Strip Mine is kind of nice.
True story. He gets to leave up Spell Pierce too, right? Yeah, you just play
Yeah,
land, leave up Spell Pierce, plus leave up the threat of Gush.
and Chris can't cast anything now.
I don't
Chris
think
can,
Chris can strip mine either.
yeah, strip mining
But
seems
man,
ambitious because first of all, you can't cast Trinisphere unless you draw a multi-land, like Shop or Ancient Tomb. Second of all, if you strip mine and Ifro has Gush, which is very plausible given the cards you've seen, like
yep.
yeah, you end up
Wow.
kind of. Ifro does lose a lot of board position here because he gets set back a bunch of mana and is not going to be able to play anything else this turn because of the Thorn. But Chris is now down to like hoping this Revoker goes the distance unless he draws a Workshop.
And Eric's found the lightning bolt that can deal with Revoker eventually. It's a two
Yeah, he's
mana
gonna
lightning bolt, but
yeah he's gonna have to wait a few turns. So this is Chris's opportunity. If Chris can land, uh, I guess 2 mana sources in a row because the thing is Trinisphere is actually not that effective right now because the Thorn's already making Ifro's cards cost additional mana. Trinisphere is more like an extra sphere than anything else. Whoa, Chris opted not to play the Wasteland. Hopefully, or my guess is primarily to bait Ifro into playing a non-basic again. Hmm.
yeah, Revoker keeps chipping away. He does have Eric down to 11. I mean,
Yeah,
Revoker going all the way isn't a crazy plan.
it's not, but with just the lone Thorn of Amethyst, and Ifro's not missed a land drop yet, you have no reason to think he's going to. I don't think you can count on that. As soon as Ifro plays like a Delver or a Pyromancer, if he's playing those cards, which again, that's what it looks like, then your Revoker plan is done. Lightning Bolt, of course, also finishes that off. I do like Chris wasting there. You can't cast anything until you draw multiple mana source anyway, and so you might as well take Ifro off of mana. Though I think Dak Faden's gonna lock this game up here. Ifro gets to Dak Faden the Emerald
Let's see.
now.
Emerald. Wow. Greatest thief in the multiverse. Yeah, is Dak just the best planeswalker in Vintage now?
Oh yeah, it's not even close.
It's not even close.
I have to say, I was skeptical when Dak first got printed and I saw people playing it. I was like, why are people playing that? It just looks so bad. But honestly, Dak is insane. Both the first two abilities are very, very relevant. And at 3 mana, basically, Dak does what Jace does, just for a mana cheaper. So, and a mana is like a world of difference in
Yeah.
Vintage.
So
So
just
yeah.
not even close. Better than Jace the Mind Sculptor.
Yeah, I believe that's accurate. And it costing red and blue mana is not even that bad either because just so many of the Vintage decks naturally want to play red.
Right. Now, how much of that is the delve cards that are running around, dig through times and treasure cruises? Is that what's really sending him over the top? Is that filling up your graveyard is actively a good thing?
That's a big part of it. It makes it so deck doesn't give you card advantage. It's just 2 for 2. But when you're filling up your graveyard and making your digs, and especially when you can run multiple cruises, because cruise deck is way better than dig deck. But
Okay.
either way, it cycles you to these cards if you don't have them, and then makes them cost 2 mana. It doesn't take very many activations of deck before you kind of locked up the game, and it actually lets you see more cards than Jace once if you don't have ways to shuffle. Though I would rather have a Jace in play than a Dak in play. It's just Dak's so much easier to cast.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. There's a new, but there's basically the best planeswalker in every format is different now.
Yeah, which is awesome. I mean, that I think is just like a hallmark of good design. It's one of the reasons that a card like Liliana the Veil, for example, is awesome because Liliana is so good in Eternal formats like Modern and Legacy. But she wasn't overpowered in Standard. She didn't crush Standard, and I think that's a really cool aspect of the game.
Fair point. All right. What do we got going on for this draw? Eric has drawn Black Lotus again. That can't be bad.
Ifro's on fire. I mean, Chris is going to have an opportunity to Chalice 0, but it's funny because you don't have that big of an incentive to Chalice 0 versus Chalice 1 against the Delver decks, which means that Ifro has a good shot at being able to Lotus out Pyromancer, then Ingot Chewer, then Preordain, which is just an absurd turn 1. Or you could just Lotus out a Hardcast Ingot Chewer, which actually is awesome too. And even if Chris does Chalice 0, Ifro can just go Volcanic, Ingot Chewer, Ruby, Lotus, Pyromancer, Preordain. So those are all sounding pretty good. I mean, if Chris is telepathic, I guess he could revoke or Lotus and then. But at that point, just play Chalice 0. That also stops Lotus.
Yeah, the psychic play is to Chalice 0. I think that the correct play is to Chalice 1.
Yeah, my guess is that the most likely line of play for Chris
is Mulligan apparently.
I guess.
You and he are on opposite ends of the Mulligan spectrum. I've seen you make some crazy keeps.
I'm not going to defend some of my keeps, but these last ones don't actually seem that close to me. I mean, in that hand, Chris got to play a turn 1 Chalice of the Void for 1 with 3 mana and Lodestone Golem Revoker. I mean, I don't understand. And a Tanglewire. I don't really see why that's a bad hand. So
It
I
didn't
will
have a
admit I have
workshop?
not wielded the workshops ever. But this
Yeah,
hand is
no,
pretty robust though.
it's true. I mean, both times he's mulligan into hands that seemed perfectly reasonable. I
Yeah.
mean, I think that he must just value things about this workshop deck that you and I do not have as much experience with.
Agreed. Agreed. I'm I've played more repeals than Mitchell's workshops in over the course of the 2 seasons. So which is not to say that I've played any workshops, but I also have played a lot of repeals. So
Oh yeah. I mean, did you manage? Did you talk Eric into playing reveals?
I tried to, but he wasn't listening. He said he would rather play cards that did things, which I guess I can't argue with. But I'm not really interested in playing cards that do things. I just want to play repeals. So now, if you're Eric, you've got a couple different lines of play here. It starts with Island tapping to cast one of your mana artifacts, tapping to cast Ruby. The question is, where do you go from there? You can just tap Ruby to cast Lotus.
Yep.
You could sack Lotus to Ingot Chewer the Sphere and then play a Young Pyromancer. The thing is, the Sphere isn't that insane against you. I could definitely see Island, Ruby, Lotus, Pyromancer go. And that way you can, even if Chris then has a Lodestone Golem, you can go land, Ingot Chewer, Lodestone Golem. I think once you get to the point where you can cast a spell or two, you'd rather kill the actual artifacts. The danger, of course, is if Chris plays multiple lock pieces, you could end up never being able to cast Ingot Chewer. But it all starts with Island Ruby. I think that it's going to be hard to get away from that line.
We think it's Island Ruby Lotus.
Yeah, Lotus follows after Ruby as well. You're right. I mean, there's no way you're not doing that. The question is, ooh, Gush. Gush is interesting too.
Does that change things? I mean, you care.
I mean, it makes it. I think you're going to end up with a Pyromancer in play no matter what you do this turn. I mean, the only other play I could really think of is just passing and then hard casting Ingot Chewer. But the danger with that is that Chris has Revokers in his deck. If he Revokers Lotus, then
Yep.
you end up in a kind of tough spot. Wow, yeah. So,
he passes.
yeah, this play seems a little riskier because now Chris can play a Revoker and revoke Lotus. I guess you're at the point where then you could just Ingot Chewer the Revoker and then still cast the Pyromancer. Though at that point, yeah, I guess you could Ingot Chewer Revoker, cast Sack Lotus, cast Pyromancer, land go, and have Gush up. That's not horrendous.
Yeah, Eric. With the Ingot Chewer, he is able to answer Revoker, which of course named Black Lotus.
Yeah, he actually Ifro could also just play a Pyromancer here. That actually might be not bad. You can't force because the Lotus is off and there's a Sphere in play, but you could just tap 3 mana and put a Young Pyromancer into play. And I guess the advantage there is that it saves your Lotus and your Ingot Chewer, but this does get rid of if he Ingot Chewers here, this does get rid of a 2/1 on Chris's side of the board.
I mean, 2/1's not particularly good against Young Pyromancer.
No. I think the biggest advantage of running this line, which I do like, is that you get to play the Pyromancer and then you get to have Gush. You can still cast Gush. So if you get Wastelanded, you get to Gush and you can cast Force of Will. So this I think this is by far the best line because you get to force whatever Chris plays first or Gush if he leads the Wasteland.
All right, so that was a 3-mana Young Pyromancer off the Black Lotus. Sphere is still in effect, of course. Eric has 1 untapped, so he can either Force of Will or Gush.
Chris is stuck at playing 1 spell per turn right now because looks like Chalice 1 is my guess.
Looks like Chalice 1. Do you fight that for your Eric?
I kind of like letting this resolve. You can blow it up with Ingot Chewers. It's not like game 1 where it just sits in play and locks out all your spells. You can just save the Preordain to pitch to Force of Will, and then next turn you can go attack, Gush returning both my lands, replay a land, go, have Force up. I think I would prefer to force like a Lodestone Golem or a harder lock piece than Chalice 1, but Ifro is running the Force here.
Did the Elemental token enter into your calculations at all?
Not really. You're going to get it no matter what. I mean, yes, getting it earlier is better, but I don't think it's a huge difference either way.
All right, he's going for the main phase Gush.
Just to see if you draw, like, I don't know. I guess you're not really super incentivized to play Ingot Chewer here, so I guess Zephyr just hits for 3 and passes. At this point, you really want to save Ingot Chewer for a Lodestone Golem or a Forge Master, or a card that does something. Chris can't just sit here playing Spheres. I mean, he has to because that's all he has. But playing Spheres into a board of Pyromancer and 2 tokens,
yeah, it's not a fun.
Yeah.
This is a best 3 out of 5 matches set. You can see the underscores setting up for our 5-match results. Not that we've ever seen a match 4 or a match 5 this year.
No, Ifro is not a fan of match 4. Yeah, my guess is that Ifro knows that he can't win a match 4, so he just prevents us from getting to that point.
Oh, is that what's going on? Okay. Trinisphere for Chris. So everything costs 3 now.
And Trinisphere does not stack with Sphere Resistance in the way that you want it to, in that an Ingature or any spell that costs less than 3 just goes up to 3 and doesn't cost a 4th mana. Sphere of Resistance does stop Dak Bane from coming out, but Chris doesn't look like he's going to ever even play anything that Ifro wants to steal.
So Eric's demolition of the playoffs is just continuing.
Ifro's about to be 8-0 in playoff games here.
This is just an insane demolition. 8-0.
Yeah, I mean, he's not like #1 ranked by accident.
It's true. No, he's pretty humble about it. You talk to him, he's like, "Oh, the heater is real. Like, yeah, it's getting my draws are great." There's a lot more to it than that.
Yeah, I mean, those things are also true, and I like taking Pearl here, by the way. I mean, we're talking about the game, even though the game's not really happening, because Ifro has an Ingature if Chris was ever to play a card that could stop Young Pyromancer, which he doesn't look like he's going to. But yeah, I mean, Ifro's draws have been great, but he's also played the games well, and he's made good deck decisions. I don't know, all that comes into play. So,
agree. Chris just with a handful of resistors, and
yeah, I mean, that's
is going to beat him up.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons I like the look of that Triskelion Stacks decks, the Frobots deck, is that it's got slightly less disruption against combo, but I didn't think Chris was that likely to come with combo. I mean, maybe his last deck's Doomsday or something, but that just didn't seem likely. And the extra threats do a good job of closing out the game, stopping, like if Chris plays Mentor, like I would not be surprised if Chris's next deck is maybe like a Mentor deck.
Okay.
Then having cards like Sword of Fire and Ice and Triskelion are good against those cards, and clearly they're good against Merfolk as well.
Yeah, I thought it was very likely Chris would have a Merfolk deck. So even just knowing there's one Merfolk deck in the mix is enough, I think.
Yeah. Well, and cards like Ravager and Triskelion, I think, are pretty good in the Workshop's Mirror. They're not insane because Forge Master's also good there, but you know, having Batterskull, Wormcoil, Sword of Fire and Ice, these are all relevant cards too.
Wow. So Time Walk clinches it. Attack for 4, attack for 5. Yeah. Chris can do the math, and he just packs him up. Wow. Eric is up 2 matches to 0. He hasn't lost a playoff match yet, even though he's had to play 8 of them.
Yeah, he's maybe come close to losing some of them, but he hasn't actually pulled the trigger. I mean, we both got to take him to game 3 a few times. So
it's true. Yeah, no, I was like, I won a game. You won 2 games. I thought Chris was going to continue the trend up, not like fill in the missing 0.
Yeah, I had a game against Ifro where I had turn 1 Island, turn 2 I'd have Mana Crypt, Show and Tell with Force of Will backup, and he had Strip Mine for the island. Like that I could beat almost anything else. I could just counter whatever he played on turn 1. His turn 1 play was Strip Mine. And it's just like, all right. I mean
all right, well, so I do want to take just a super quick break while we get ready for match 3. I want to run the Tempest Remastered ad again. This is certainly a product I'm excited about. And
oh yeah.